I never imagined I'd be grateful to my sister for stealing my boyfriend, but the universe works in mysterious ways. When I saw their engagement photos plastered across social media, I felt my heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. Instead of blocking them both, I sent my congratulations and focused on building my own life. 10 years later, when I walked down the aisle toward James, the man my sister had obsessed over for years, I couldn't help but smile at life's perfect irony. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Olivia Chen, and 11 years ago, I had what most would consider an enviable life. At 25, I was working as a junior editor at one of New York's prestigious publishing houses, living in a cozy Brooklyn apartment, and dating my college sweetheart, Ethan Miller. We'd been together for 4 years, navigating the transition from campus life to adult careers with relative ease. While we hadn't discussed marriage explicitly, everyone in our circle assumed it was just a matter of time. I still remember our last happy day together with perfect clarity. It was autumn in New York, the trees in Central Park ablaze with red and gold. Ethan had planned a picnic with all my favorites: brie cheese, sourdough bread, apples, and the chocolate truffles from that little shop in Greenwich Village. We spent hours talking about everything and nothing, the way you do when you're comfortable with someone. He'd tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and said, "You know what I love about us, Liv? How easy it is. No drama, just us." The irony of those words still makes me wince sometimes. My younger sister Mia and I had always been close despite our differences. 2 years my junior, she was the free spirit to my practical planner, the spontaneous adventurer to my careful researcher. Where I preferred the safety of books and familiar routines, Mia chased experiences and novelty. Our parents, David and Helen Chen, had always encouraged our different strengths. Olivia has her father's head, Mom would say proudly, and Mia has my heart. Growing up, there was never any real competition between us. Our interests rarely overlapped. I excelled academically while Mia shone in social situations and creative pursuits. We complemented each other, or so I thought. I never worried about introducing boyfriends to Mia. She'd dated a string of artistic, brooding men who were nothing like the steady, ambitious types I preferred. When Ethan first met Mia at our parents' anniversary dinner 3 years into our relationship, he'd described her as fun but exhausting. I'd laughed, relieved by his assessment. The revelation came on an ordinary Tuesday. I was returning from a business trip to Boston, where I'd been meeting with a promising author. I'd taken an earlier train than planned, hoping to surprise Ethan at his apartment. When I called and got no answer, I decided to swing by anyway, using the key he'd given me 6 months earlier. The apartment was quiet when I entered, but Ethan's keys were on the counter, his laptop open on the coffee table. I called out thinking he might be in the shower, but the bathroom door stood open, empty. Then I heard it, a muffled laugh coming from the bedroom. A laugh I recognized instantly. For a moment, I stood frozen, my mind refusing to process what my instincts already knew. Then, as if sleepwalking, I moved toward the bedroom door and pushed it open. The image seared itself into my memory. Ethan and Mia, tangled in his sheets, her dark hair spread across his pillow. They didn't notice me at first, too absorbed in their private conversation. I heard Mia say, "She doesn't understand you like I do," before they finally registered my presence. What followed was chaos. Ethan scrambling for words, Mia pulling the sheet up to her chin, her eyes wide with shock but not, I noted with searing clarity, with shame. "Olivia, I can explain," Ethan started, but I was already backing away. "How long?" My voice sounded strangely calm to my own ears. They exchanged a glance that told me everything. This wasn't a one-time mistake. 2 months, Mia finally admitted. "It just happened, Liv. We didn't plan this." 2 months, while I'd been sending Ethan good morning texts and planning our future. He'd been sleeping with my sister. The betrayal was so complete, so perfect in its devastation that I couldn't even cry. "Olivia, please." Ethan reached for me, but I recoiled. "Don't touch me." I placed his key on the dresser. "You deserve each other." I walked out with whatever dignity I could muster, made it to the subway station, and then broke down completely, sobbing on a bench, while commuters averted their eyes with practiced New York indifference. The family fallout was nuclear. My father, usually so measured and calm, was incandescent with rage. "No daughter of mine betrays her own blood," he'd thundered when Mia tried to explain, at an excruciating family dinner the following week. My mother vacillated between distress and a misguided attempt at peacemaking. "These things happen in families," she'd said weakly. "The heart is complicated." "This isn't about hearts, Mom," I'd replied, my voice brittle. "It's about basic decency." My closest friends rallied around me. My roommate from college, Rebecca, flew in from Chicago and spent a weekend helping me purge my apartment of anything that reminded me of Ethan. My coworker, Zoe, became my designated +1 for events I couldn't face alone. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But the person who surprised me most was my boss, Eleanor Grant. A formidable woman in her 50s who'd built our publishing division from scratch. She called me into her office after noticing my reddened eyes and distracted demeanor in meetings. "Personal problems make for better editors," she said after I'd reluctantly shared my situation. "Now you understand betrayal, heartbreak, family dysfunction. That's half the fiction section right there." Her unorthodox pep talk made me laugh for the first time in weeks. "Besides," she added, "I have a manuscript that needs your full attention. Nothing cures heartbreak like work that matters." The manuscript she handed me was Fractured Bonds by J.L. Morgan, an unknown writer with extraordinary talent. The novel, about siblings separated by war who find each other decades later, consumed me. I threw myself into editing it, staying late at the office, taking pages home on weekends. The author's raw exploration of family ties being tested and ultimately strengthened became my emotional lifeline. Meanwhile, Ethan and Mia's relationship continued to develop with unsettling speed. Within 3 months of my discovery, they had moved in together. My mother called with the news, her voice carefully neutral. "They wanted you to hear it from family, not see it online." "How considerate," I replied, the sarcasm heavy in my voice. I tried to maintain minimal contact with Mia for our parents' sake, though I declined family gatherings when I knew she would attend. Ethan, to his credit, kept his distance. The few texts he sent, weak apologies and awkward inquiries about returning some of my belongings, went unanswered. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself, but the way it made me question everything. Had there been signs I missed? Was I so caught up in work that I'd neglected Ethan? Did Mia's more vibrant personality make her inherently more lovable? These thoughts plagued me during sleepless nights. Dr. Diana Miller, the therapist Rebecca insisted I see, helped me challenge these destructive thoughts. "Your sister and your ex-boyfriend made choices that reflect their character, not yours," she emphasized during our sessions. "Their betrayal says nothing about your worthiness." 6 months into our therapy, Dr. Miller suggested I start dating again. "Not to find a relationship," she clarified, "but to remember that you're more than what happened to you." My first attempts were disastrous. I either found myself suspiciously analyzing every word and gesture from my date, or oversharing about my trust issues before the appetizers arrived. One particularly kind man named Daniel listened patiently to my story over dinner, then gently suggested I might need more time before dating seriously. He was right. Instead of romantic relationships, I focused on rebuilding other parts of my life. I joined a running group that met at Prospect Park on Saturday mornings. I took a creative writing workshop, where I discovered my own voice beyond the manuscripts I edited. I volunteered at a literacy program for immigrant children, finding unexpected joy in their enthusiasm for stories. And I threw myself into making Fractured Bonds a success. When the novel was published 10 months after my breakup, it received glowing reviews. Eleanor promoted me to senior editor, and the author J.L. Morgan specifically requested to work with me on his second book. Then came the invitation. It was a Sunday morning, and I was sorting through my mail after returning from a run. The envelope was cream-colored with silver embossing, thick, expensive paper that screamed significance before I even opened it. Inside was an engagement announcement and invitation to a celebration party. Olivia Chen and Ethan Miller requested the pleasure of my company to celebrate their upcoming union. The party was scheduled for the following month at an upscale restaurant in Manhattan. I stared at the invitation until the elegant script blurred before my eyes. They'd been together barely a year. The speed of their progression felt like salt in a wound that had only just begun to heal. Enclosed was a handwritten note from Mia. "Liv, I know things between us are complicated, but you're still my sister. It would mean everything to have you there. Ethan agrees. We both miss you." My first instinct was to rip everything to shreds. My second was to call Rebecca, who responded with appropriate outrage. "The audacity," she fumed. "After everything they did, they expect you to show up and celebrate? Tell them to go to hell." But as my initial shock subsided, a different thought emerged. Perhaps there was value in facing them on my terms, in showing them, and myself, that they no longer had the power to devastate me. "I think I'm going to go," I told Dr. Miller during our next session. She studied me carefully. "Why?" "Because hiding makes me feel like I've done something wrong. Because I'm tired of rearranging my life to avoid them. Because—" I hesitated. "Because maybe seeing them together will finally make this real, and I can stop wondering what if." Dr. Miller nodded slowly. "Those are valid reasons. But I'm concerned about the emotional cost. What support will you have there?" That was the question that led to me calling Zoe, who immediately volunteered to be my +1. "We'll make you look so hot they'll both cry with regret," she promised. What followed was what Zoe dramatically termed Operation Phoenix, a comprehensive plan to ensure I walked into that engagement party radiating confidence and success. We embarked on shopping expeditions for the perfect outfit, settling on a midnight blue dress that was elegant without trying too hard. I splurged on a haircut at an exclusive salon, where the stylist added subtle caramel highlights to my dark hair and taught me a sleek styling technique. "Looking good is the best revenge," Zoe insisted as we left a spa after indulgent facials the day before the party, "but bringing the perfect date would be even better." "I'm not ready to date someone just to make Ethan jealous," I protested. "Not dating," Zoe clarified. "Just a devastating male friend who makes everyone wonder what they're missing." I laughed off the suggestion, but fate had its own plans. That evening, I received an unexpected call from James Harris, the mysterious J.L. Morgan himself. He was in New York for meetings with our publishing house and had questions about the marketing plan for his second novel. "I know it's last minute," he said, his slight British accent making even business talk sound charming, "but would you be available for dinner tomorrow? Eleanor mentioned you might have plans, but I'm hoping to catch you before I fly back to London." I hesitated only briefly before explaining about the engagement party. "But I could meet earlier in the day," I offered. There was a pause on the line. "Actually," he said, "would it be terribly inappropriate to suggest I accompany you? I'm fascinated by the family dynamics you've helped me explore in my writing, and this sounds like a veritable case study." His tone was light, but not mocking. "Plus, I do clean up nicely for social occasions." The offer was unexpected and slightly unconventional, but something about it appealed to me. James and I had developed a strong professional relationship through countless emails, phone calls, and video conferences. But we'd only met in person twice, both times in group settings with other publishing staff present. He was brilliant, thoughtful, and intriguingly private for someone who wrote with such emotional intelligence. "Are you sure?" I asked. "It might be awkward." "Olivia," he replied, "I've written 300 pages about family estrangement and reconciliation. I think I can handle an engagement party." And so it was decided. James would be my +1 to Mia and Ethan's celebration. What I didn't know then was how this impulsive decision would change everything. The morning of the engagement party, I woke with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. For a moment, I considered texting James to cancel, making up an excuse about feeling ill. Instead, I forced myself out of bed and into my running shoes. 6 miles around Prospect Park cleared my head and settled my nerves. By the time James knocked on my apartment door that evening, I felt as prepared as I could be. When I opened the door, however, I wasn't prepared for him. The J.L. Morgan I knew professionally was usually rumpled and casual in our video calls, often wearing faded t-shirts. His dark blonde hair slightly too long. The man standing before me was transformed, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, hair styled with just enough product to look intentional without being stiff, and a smile that made his green eyes crinkle at the corners. "You look beautiful," he said simply, handing me a small bouquet of unusual flowers. Not roses or lilies, but wildflowers in rich purples and blues. Thank you, I managed, suddenly self-conscious. You clean up very well yourself. Shall we? He offered his arm with an old-fashioned formality that somehow wasn't at all stuffy. During the taxi ride to the restaurant, James asked thoughtful questions about my family history and my relationship with Mia before the betrayal. His interest seemed genuine, not voyeuristic, and talking about it in analytical terms helped me distance myself emotionally from what awaited us. The most interesting thing about sibling relationships, he observed, is how they contain both our oldest allies and our most intimate competitors. No one knows your vulnerabilities quite like a sibling. Is that from experience or research? I asked, realizing I knew almost nothing about his personal life despite our many professional conversations. Both, he said with a slight smile. I have 2 brothers. We're close now, but it wasn't always easy. Before I could ask more, we arrived at the restaurant. Standing on the sidewalk, I felt my courage faltering. James must have sensed it, because he took my hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. Remember, he said quietly, you're the protagonist of this story, not a secondary character. With those words resonating in my mind, I walked into the party, James's reassuring presence beside me. The venue was elegant, but not ostentatious. A private room at the back of an upscale Italian restaurant. About 50 people mingled, holding champagne flutes and small plates of appetizers. I spotted my parents immediately. My father looking uncomfortable in a suit, my mother animated as she spoke with Ethan's parents. Then I saw them, Mia in a champagne-colored dress that complemented her olive skin. Her dark hair swept up to reveal the long neck our grandmother had always envied. Beside her, Ethan looked both familiar and strange, his face thinner than I remembered, his smile not quite reaching his eyes as he nodded at whatever his future father-in-law was saying. Deep breath, James murmured, his hand steady at the small of my back. My mother spotted us first, her eyes widening slightly before she hurried over. Olivia, you came! She embraced me tightly, then pulled back to assess James with obvious curiosity. Mom, this is James Harris, I said, deliberately omitting his pen name. James, my mother, Helen Chen. Mrs. Chen, it's a pleasure, James said, his British accent becoming slightly more pronounced in formal introductions. Thank you for welcoming me to your family celebration. Oh, please call me Helen, my mother gushed, clearly charmed. How do you and Olivia know each other? We worked together, I said quickly, not wanting to deal with the excitement that would ensue if she realized he was J.L. Morgan. My mother had devoured fractured bonds in a single weekend. Olivia's been instrumental in shaping my recent projects, James added smoothly. She's quite remarkable at what she does. My mother beamed, clearly pleased to see me with someone so polished and articulate. You must come meet my husband, she insisted, leading us toward my father, who stood awkwardly by the bar. The introductions continued as we made our way through the room. James was unfailingly charming, showing genuine interest in conversations while staying attentive to my comfort level. When we encountered distant relatives or family friends who didn't know about the complicated background, he deftly fielded questions about our relationship with vague but pleasant responses that implied familiarity, without stating anything specific. I was just beginning to relax when Mia appeared before us, Ethan trailing slightly behind her. She looked both nervous and determined. Liv, you came. She moved as if to hug me, then seemed to think better of it, awkwardly extending her hand instead. I shook it briefly, the formality between sisters more painful than I'd anticipated. Congratulations, I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded. Ethan nodded at me, his expression a complicated mix of guilt and wariness. Thanks for coming, Olivia. An uncomfortable silence descended until James stepped forward, offering his hand. James Harris. I'm a friend of Olivia's. Something flickered in Mia's eyes as she took in James. Appreciation, certainly, but also something else I couldn't quite identify. Mia Chen, she said, her smile brightening. Soon to be Miller. Ethan Miller, Ethan introduced himself, shaking James's hand with perhaps more force than necessary. Congratulations to you both, James said pleasantly. The venue is lovely. Thank you, Mia replied, still looking at James with unusual intensity. What was your name again? James Harris. Harris? She repeated, as if trying to place the name. You look so familiar. Have we met before? James smiled politely. I don't believe so. I would have remembered. It was a standard response, but something about the way he said it made both Mia and Ethan shift uncomfortably. How do you two know each other? Ethan asked, looking between James and me. Through work, I said simply. Olivia has been editing my novel, James elaborated. She's quite brilliant at it. Recognition dawned on Mia's face. Wait, are you J.L. Morgan, the author of Fractured Bonds? James inclined his head slightly. Guilty as charged. Mia's reaction was immediate and intense. Oh my God, I absolutely loved that book. I couldn't put it down. The way you wrote about the siblings finding each other after being separated for so long, it was so moving. I felt a jolt of surprise. I hadn't known Mia had read the novel. We'd barely communicated in the past year, but it was strange to think of her reading words I had helped shape, a story I had poured myself into during the worst months of our estrangement. That's very kind, James replied. Olivia deserves much of the credit. The book would be quite different without her insights. Mia's gaze flickered to me, something like envy crossing her features. I didn't realize you were working with such prominent authors now, Liv. There was an undercurrent to her words that I recognized from childhood, the slight edge that appeared whenever I achieved something she wanted. Eleanor assigned me to James's manuscript last year, I said, deliberately casual. It was a fortunate pairing. Very fortunate indeed, James agreed, his hand finding the small of my back again in a gesture that could be interpreted as either collegial or intimate. The moment was interrupted by the chiming of a glass. Ethan's father was calling for everyone's attention for the formal toasts. As we moved toward the center of the room, I felt James lean close. Your sister has read my book at least 3 times, he whispered. How could you possibly know that? The way she referenced it. Specific, not general. And there's a small coffee stain on the lower right corner of page 247 in the first edition. She mentioned that scene specifically. I stared at him, impressed despite myself. You're observant. I'm a writer, he replied with a slight smile. It's an occupational hazard. The toasts began with Ethan's father offering traditional well wishes, followed by my father's more reserved but polite remarks. Then Mia's maid of honor, her college roommate Tasha, took the microphone. When Mia told me she'd fallen in love with Ethan, Tasha began, clearly unaware of the room's sudden tension. I was skeptical. Isn't he dating your sister? I asked, but Mia insisted that what they felt was special, unexpected, but real. I felt the blood drain from my face. Beside me, James casually handed me a fresh glass of champagne, his steady presence anchoring me as Tasha continued her unwittingly tactless speech. Sometimes the path to true love isn't straightforward, she concluded. Sometimes you have to be brave enough to follow your heart, even when others might not understand. To Mia and Ethan! As glasses were raised around the room, I took a long sip of champagne, grateful for its steadying burn. When I lowered my glass, I found Mia watching me, her expression a mixture of defiance and something that might have been regret. The formal portion of the evening concluded, and the gathering shifted to mingling once more. James and I made our way to a quieter corner, where he procured small plates of food from passing servers. Are you all right? He asked quietly. Better than I expected, actually, I replied, surprised to find it was true. It's strange. A year ago, hearing their story romanticized like that would have destroyed me. Now it just seems sad. James studied me thoughtfully. Sad for them or for you? Both, maybe, but mostly for them. They've built their relationship on a foundation of deception. I'm not sure how you move forward from that with complete trust. We were interrupted by my mother, who had clearly been waiting for an opportunity to speak with us alone. Olivia, dear, could I borrow you for a moment? Your Aunt May is asking about you. I glanced at James, who nodded encouragingly. I'll be fine. I spotted a bookshelf over there that needs investigating. As I followed my mother across the room, she leaned in conspiratorially. He's wonderful, Olivia. So handsome and accomplished. How long have you been seeing him? We're not dating, Mom, I corrected her. We're colleagues and friends. She gave me a knowing look. The way he looks at you says otherwise. Before I could respond, we reached my aunt, and the conversation shifted to family updates and polite inquiries about my work. By the time I extricated myself, I had lost sight of James in the crowd. I found him, unexpectedly, deep in conversation with Mia. They were standing by the bookshelf he had mentioned, her animation a stark contrast to his more reserved demeanor. As I approached, I caught fragments of their discussion. Must have been difficult to research, Mia was saying. Challenging but necessary, James replied. Authenticity requires... He broke off as he noticed me. Ah, Olivia. Your sister was just telling me about her work in gallery curation. Mia turned, her expression brightening artificially. Liv. I was just telling James about the new exhibition I'm organizing. Contemporary Asian American artists exploring identity and belonging. Sounds interesting, I said neutrally. An awkward silence fell until James smoothly suggested we should circulate further. As we moved away, Mia touched my arm, holding me back for a moment. He's amazing, Liv, she whispered, her eyes following James as he greeted an elderly relative a few steps away. You're so lucky. There was a wistfulness in her voice that caught me off guard. Before I could respond, Ethan appeared at her side, his arms sliding possessively around her waist. Everything okay? He asked, his gaze moving between us. Fine, Mia replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Just complimenting Liv on her choice of date. Something hardened in Ethan's expression. We should greet the Jacobsons, he said, steering Mia away. James rejoined me, his expression thoughtful. Your sister seems to be having second thoughts. What makes you say that? The way she looks at you? And at her fiancé. There's something wistful there. Regretful. I shook my head. Mia always wants what she doesn't have. Once she gets it, the shine wears off quickly. An astute observation, James remarked. Quite useful for character development. Are you taking notes for your next novel? I asked, half joking. Always, he admitted with a smile. Though I promise any resemblance to persons living or dead will be entirely coincidental. As the evening progressed, I found myself relaxing in James's company, even enjoying aspects of the gathering despite its complicated emotional landscape. We discovered a mutual love of obscure films while chatting with my cousin, debated the merits of various Brooklyn neighborhoods with Ethan's brother, and shared quiet jokes about the increasingly drunk best man. By the time we said our goodbyes, making the rounds of polite farewells, I realized with surprise that I had managed to survive the evening without a single moment of breakdown or humiliation. In fact, with James beside me, I had actually emerged with dignity intact, and perhaps even a certain victory in the eyes of onlookers. Thank you, I said sincerely, as our taxi pulled away from the restaurant. You made what could have been an excruciating evening almost enjoyable. It was my pleasure, James replied, though I should be thanking you. That was more inspiring for my writing than a month of research. I laughed. Glad my family drama could serve the literary world. Not just the drama, he clarified. Your grace under pressure. The complex dynamics between sisters. The way people rewrite history to justify their choices. He turned slightly to face me in the darkened back seat. You were magnificent, you know. Something in his tone made my breath catch. I was just trying to survive the evening. And yet you did more than survive. You showed everyone in that room that you're thriving. His eyes held mine. Particularly when your sister realized who I was. What do you mean? James hesitated before answering. This may sound strange, but I believe your sister has been following my career quite closely. The questions she asked were specific, about passages that weren't widely discussed in reviews, about my writing process, about plans for future books that haven't been publicly announced. She's always been interested in the arts, I said, though something about his observation unsettled me. Perhaps, he conceded, but there was something in her reaction when she realized I was working with you, almost as if what? As if I was someone she had imagined meeting under very different circumstances. He shook his head slightly. Forgive me. I'm probably reading too much into it. Occupational hazard, as I said. When we reached my apartment, James walked me to my door, maintaining the perfect balance between gentlemanly and presumptuous. Would you like to come in for coffee? I offered, surprising myself. I would, very much, he replied, but I have an early flight tomorrow. Perhaps a rain check? I nodded, a mixture of relief and disappointment washing over me. Of course. Olivia, he said, his voice softening. Tonight wasn't just professional courtesy or research for me. I've enjoyed getting to know you beyond our work together. I've enjoyed it too, I admitted. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to step back if I wanted to, and placed a gentle kiss on my cheek. I'll call you when I'm back in New York, he promised. As I watched him walk toward the waiting taxi, I realized with a start that for the first time in over a year, I was genuinely looking forward to something, or someone, new. The next morning, I woke to a text from Mia. Thank you for coming last night. It meant a lot. Can we talk sometime? I stared at the message, uncertain how to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to maintain the distance that had protected me during the past year. But another part, perhaps the part influenced by editing James's novel about estranged siblings, was curious about what she wanted to say. Before I could decide, another message arrived, this one from James. Thank you for a memorable evening. Looking forward to continuing our conversation when I return. In the meantime, Chapter 3 needs your expert touch. I smiled, setting aside Mia's message for later consideration. Today, I had manuscripts to edit and a life to continue building, one that was finally beginning to feel like my own again, not just a reaction to what had been taken from me. What I didn't realize then was how profoundly that evening would alter the course of our lives. Mine, Mia's, Ethan's and James's, setting in motion events that would take 10 years to fully unfold. But that's the next part of this story, and it's even more surprising than how it began. The months following Mia and Ethan's engagement party marked a subtle but profound shift in my life. What began as a single evening with James Harris evolved into something I hadn't dared hope for, a genuine connection that developed slowly through international phone calls, lengthy email exchanges, and video chats across time zones. 3 weeks after the party, James returned to New York for meetings with the publishing house. Dinner? He texted simply. We met at a small Ethiopian restaurant in the West Village, far from anywhere I might encounter family or mutual acquaintances. Away from the charged atmosphere of the engagement party, our conversation flowed even more naturally, ranging from books that had shaped our worldviews, to childhood memories, to our shared love of thunderstorms. I used to sneak onto the roof of our apartment building during summer storms, I confessed over coffee. My parents would have been horrified. Brave, James observed with a smile. I'm learning that about you. There's a daring streak beneath the careful editor exterior. What about you? I asked. Any dangerous childhood pursuits? I once convinced my younger brother to help me build a raft across the Thames. His green eyes crinkled at the memory. It sank within 30 seconds of launching. We both caught pneumonia. Worth it? Entirely, he assured me. The best stories often come from terrible ideas. Our evening extended from dinner to a walk along the High Line, neither of us ready to end the night despite the late hour. When he finally walked me home, the goodbye at my door turned into a first kiss that left me breathless, and wondering if perhaps my heart wasn't as permanently damaged as I'd feared. James returned to London the next day, but we established a routine of daily messages and weekly video calls. Unlike my relationship with Ethan, which had always felt comfortable but somewhat predictable, connecting with James involved a constant sense of discovery. He challenged my thoughts about books, shared drafts of new writing that made me see the world differently, and listened, really listened, when I spoke about my hopes for the future. Meanwhile, I finally responded to Mia's text, agreeing to meet for coffee. The conversation was awkward, filled with long pauses and careful navigation around sensitive topics. She seemed genuinely regretful about the distance between us, though notably not about the choices that had created it. "I miss having a sister," she said, stirring her latte without meeting my eyes. "I miss who we used to be," I admitted, "but I don't know if we can go back to that." "Maybe we can find something new?" she suggested tentatively. "Something different, but still us." It was a start. Not forgiveness exactly, but an acknowledgement that our shared history wasn't something either of us wanted to completely abandon. We agreed to occasional text check-ins, a cautious step toward whatever our relationship might become. I was careful not to mention James during our conversation. Something in me wanted to keep him separate from the complicated dynamics of my family, to protect this new beginning from old patterns. 5 months after the engagement party, James's second novel was complete, and Eleanor assigned me as his editor once again. The manuscript was brilliant, a story about a man who discovers his deceased father led a double life, complete with a second family. The themes of identity and betrayal felt personally significant, though James insisted he'd begun the concept before meeting me. "Art and life often move in parallel," he said during one of our editorial calls. "Sometimes they even inform each other." When he came to New York for the launch of the paperback edition of Fractured Bonds, our professional relationship had already evolved into something unquestionably personal. He stayed for 2 weeks, and by the time he left, we had acknowledged that what was developing between us was serious, despite the complications of distance. "I'm not interested in casual," he told me on his last night in New York. "Not with you." "Neither am I," I assured him, realizing I meant it completely. We established a pattern: James coming to New York for 2 weeks every couple of months, me occasionally flying to London when my schedule permitted. During one of my visits to his Notting Hill flat, I discovered a wall covered with index cards, his planning method for his third novel. "It's about choices," he explained, showing me how the narrative branched and reconnected. How a single decision can create entirely different lives. "Are you a believer in fate or free will?" I asked, studying the intricate map of his story. "Both," he replied thoughtfully. "I think we make choices freely, but patterns exist that guide us towards certain people, certain moments. The trick is recognizing those moments when they arrive." 3 months later, Mia and Ethan's wedding invitation arrived. Another cream envelope with elegant typography. Unlike the engagement party, which had felt like a test I needed to pass, the wedding stirred less emotional turmoil. I had moved forward in ways I couldn't have imagined a year earlier. James immediately offered to accompany me again. "I've become rather invested in this particular family saga," he said lightly during our video call. The wedding was set for June at a vineyard in the Hudson Valley. By then, James and I had been seeing each other for nearly 8 months, our relationship deepening despite the Atlantic Ocean between us. When he arrived in New York a week before the wedding, he surprised me with news. "I've been offered a visiting professor position at Columbia for the fall semester," he announced over dinner at my apartment. "Teaching creative writing while I work on the next book." My heart leapt at the implication: 3 uninterrupted months together, a chance to experience daily life as a couple rather than intense bursts of connection between long separations. "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely thrilled. "When did this happen?" "They approached me last month. I wanted to be sure it was confirmed before telling you." He looked slightly nervous. "I'll need to find a place to stay." "Stay here," I offered impulsively. "My apartment is small, but are you sure? It's a significant step." I considered the question seriously. My caution after Ethan's betrayal had evolved into something more nuanced. Not fear of connection, but a healthy respect for pacing and intention. "I'm sure," I said finally. "We've been doing this long-distance dance for months. I want to know what it's like to wake up with you on an ordinary Tuesday, to argue about whose turn it is to do the dishes, to build something real." His smile was answer enough. The day of Mia and Ethan's wedding arrived with perfect June weather, sunshine and a gentle breeze that rustled through the vineyard's leaves. I felt surprisingly calm as James and I drove north from the city, the Hudson River occasionally visible through breaks in the tree line. "You seem different from the night of their engagement party," James observed, "more at peace." "I am," I realized. "A year ago, I was still defining myself by what I'd lost. Now." I glanced at him, at his hands competent on the steering wheel, at the profile I'd grown to love. "Now I'm more interested in what I've found." The venue was undeniably beautiful. Rows of grapevines stretching toward distant hills, a restored barn decorated with wildflowers and twinkling lights, white chairs arranged in neat rows facing a floral arch similar to the one from their engagement party. My parents greeted us warmly, my mother hugging James like he was already family. In the years since we'd met, he had won them over completely during occasional dinners and holiday gatherings. My father, initially protective and suspicious of any man in my life after Ethan's betrayal, had developed a genuine respect for James, particularly after discovering their shared interest in historical biographies. "The ceremony starts in 20 minutes, my mother informed us. They've set up drinks on the terrace while people are being seated. On the stone terrace overlooking the vineyard, guests mingled in summer finery, colorful dresses and linen suits catching the golden afternoon light. James went to get us glasses of the vineyard's signature rosé while I greeted distant relatives and family friends. "Olivia," a familiar voice said behind me. I turned to find Ethan, looking nervous in his formal attire. "Thank you for coming." "Congratulations," I said, meaning it sincerely. The sight of him no longer triggered pain or regret, just a muted recognition of someone who had once been important to me. "I wanted to speak with you before the ceremony," he said, glancing around to ensure we weren't overheard, "to apologize again properly. The way things happened between us, between me and Mia, it wasn't right. I should have been honest with you sooner." I studied him, noting the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "Why are you telling me this today, of all days?" He ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, a familiar nervous gesture. "Because I want to start this marriage with a clean conscience. And because—" he hesitated. "Because I want you to know that what happened wasn't because you weren't enough. It was about my own confusion, my own mistakes." "I know that now," I said quietly, "but thank you for saying it." James appeared at my side, handing me a glass of wine. His presence felt like a shield, though I realized I no longer needed protection from Ethan or the past he represented. "Everything all right?" James asked, his tone pleasant but watchful. "Fine," I assured him. Ethan was just sharing some pre-wedding reflections. Ethan nodded awkwardly to James. "Good to see you again." "Likewise," James replied. "Best wishes for the day." As Ethan moved away to greet other guests, James turned to me. "Closure?" "Something like that," I said, though I think I had already found it before today. The ceremony was brief but touching. Mia looked beautiful in a bohemian-style gown that suited the vineyard setting, her dark hair adorned with small white flowers. When she and Ethan exchanged vows, their voices carrying across the assembled guests, I felt a surprising lack of emotion, neither joy nor pain, just a quiet acknowledgement that their path was no longer intertwined with mine. During the reception, James and I sat with my parents and my father's brother's family. The conversation flowed easily, focusing on my cousin's recent law school graduation and my uncle's retirement plans. It felt refreshingly normal, free from the undercurrents of tension that had marked the engagement party. After dinner, as the dancing began, Mia approached our table. She looked radiant, if slightly flushed from champagne and excitement. "Liv, could we talk for a minute?" she asked, her expression hopeful. I nodded, following her to a quiet corner of the terrace. The sun was beginning to set, painting the vineyard in shades of gold and amber. "I just wanted to thank you," she said, twisting her new wedding ring. "For being here, for trying with me this past year. I know it hasn't been easy." "It hasn't," I agreed. "But we're family. That doesn't just disappear, even when things get complicated." She smiled, relief evident in her expression. "I worried for so long that I'd lost you forever. That what I did was unforgivable." I considered her words carefully. "Forgiveness is a process, Mia, I'm still working on it. But I don't want to hold on to anger and hurt forever. That only hurts me in the end. When did you get so wise? She asked, half joking. Somewhere between heartbreak and healing, I replied honestly. It changes you, sometimes for the better, if you let it. She glanced toward where James stood chatting with my father. He's amazing, Liv. You can see how much he adores you. He is, I agreed, following her gaze. And it's mutual. I've read all his books, she admitted. Even the early ones before Fractured Bonds. There's something about his writing that feels, I don't know, like he understands things most people miss. That's James, I said, feeling a surge of pride and affection. He notices everything. Mia hesitated, then asked, Is it serious between you two? Yes, I said simply. He's moving to New York in September, at least temporarily. I'm happy for you, she said. And I believed her, despite the complexity of our history. You deserve someone who sees how incredible you are. As the reception continued into the evening, James and I danced under strings of fairy lights, his hand warm and steady against the small of my back. Having fun? He murmured into my ear. Surprisingly, yes, I replied. A year makes a remarkable difference. Speaking of years, he said, his voice taking on a thoughtful quality. Where do you see us in a year? In 5? The question caught me off guard, but not unpleasantly. I haven't allowed myself to plan that far ahead in a long time, I admitted. After Ethan, I became cautious about future projections. Understandably, James acknowledged. But perhaps it's time to consider new possibilities. I looked up at him, at the face that had become so dear to me. I think I'd like that. To imagine a future together, I mean. His smile in response was both tender and certain, a promise of conversations to come. The following September, James moved into my Brooklyn apartment as planned. The transition from long-distance relationship to shared daily life had its challenges. His late-night writing sessions, clashing with my early morning routine, negotiations about shelf space and kitchen organization, the discovery of small habits that were charming from across an ocean but occasionally irritating in close quarters. But there were unexpected joys too. Waking to find fresh coffee already made because he knew my morning schedule, the way he read passages from his work in progress aloud to test their rhythm, impromptu midweek adventures to obscure bookstores or jazz clubs when inspiration wasn't flowing. 3 months stretched into 6 as Columbia extended his position. By then, we had established a rhythm together, a shared life that felt both comfortable and exciting. When his visiting professorship concluded, James faced a decision about returning to London. I've been thinking, he said one evening as we walked along the Brooklyn promenade, the Manhattan skyline glittering across the water, about location and belonging. And? I prompted, sensing the weight of the moment, and I realized that home isn't London for me anymore. It's wherever you are. He stopped walking, turning to face me. I can write from anywhere. My publisher doesn't care if I'm in London or New York as long as I meet my deadlines. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I'd like to stay. Permanently. If that's what you want too. My answer was a kiss that left no doubt about my feelings on the matter. The following week, we began looking for a larger apartment together, something with enough space for both of us to work comfortably. We found a pre-war building in Park Slope, with high ceilings and large windows that flooded the rooms with light. It felt like a fresh start, a home that would be ours from the beginning, rather than one of us moving into the other's established space. 3 years after we met, on a rainy April evening in our Park Slope apartment, James proposed. It wasn't an elaborate production, just the two of us, a home-cooked meal, and the simple, profound question that changed everything. My yes was immediate and certain, the culmination of a relationship built on mutual respect, intellectual connection, and a love that had grown steadily, without the dramatic highs and lows I'd experienced in previous relationships. When I called my parents with the news, their joy was unrestrained. My father, never one for emotional displays, told me gruffly that James was the son he'd always wanted, which moved James to tears when I relayed the message. Telling Mia was more complicated. In the years since her wedding, we had rebuilt a cautious relationship. Monthly coffee dates had evolved into occasional dinners, sometimes with Ethan and James, sometimes just the two of us. I had noticed a gradual shift in her, a new maturity that suggested marriage had prompted some necessary growth. When I called to share our engagement news, her response seemed genuinely happy, though I detected a note of something else beneath her congratulations. Later that week, when we met for our regular coffee, she confessed what was troubling her. "Ethan and I are having problems," she admitted, her fingers nervously shredding a napkin. "We've been in counseling for 6 months, but things aren't improving." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it. Despite our history, I didn't wish them unhappiness. "The thing is," she continued, not meeting my eyes, "when you called about your engagement, Ethan made a comment about how you've moved on so successfully while we're struggling. It wasn't kind." I absorbed this information, unsure how to respond. "Relationships are different," I offered finally. "Comparing doesn't help anyone." "I know," she sighed, "but sometimes I wonder if we made a terrible mistake. If what we did to you cursed us somehow." "That's not how life works, Mia," I said gently. "Whatever issues you and Ethan are facing, they're about the two of you, not about what happened with me." She nodded, though she didn't look convinced. "I am happy for you and James. Truly. He's exceptional." "Thank you," I said simply, not wanting to dwell on James's qualities given her current state of mind. As I walked home from our meeting, I reflected on the strange turns life takes. 5 years earlier, I had been devastated by Mia and Ethan's betrayal. Now I was planning a wedding to a man who exceeded anything I could have imagined for myself, while they were struggling to maintain the relationship that had caused so much pain. It wasn't satisfaction I felt at this realization, more like a quiet awareness of life's unpredictability and the way time reveals the true nature of our choices. Our wedding planning was deliberately simple. Neither James nor I wanted an elaborate event, just a meaningful ceremony surrounded by those closest to us. We chose a small botanical garden in Brooklyn for the venue, limited our guest list to 60 people, and focused on personal touches rather than extravagance. 6 months before our wedding date, Mia called me in tears. "Ethan's moving out," she sobbed. "He says he needs space to figure things out." I listened as she poured out the details of their deteriorating marriage. Communication breakdowns, resentment over career priorities, the growing distance between them. While I offered what comfort I could, I was careful not to position myself as her marriage counselor, aware of the complicated history that made such a role inappropriate. In the weeks that followed, Mia leaned heavily on me for support, calling frequently and suggesting sister nights that often turned into tearful discussions of her marriage. I tried to be there for her while maintaining appropriate boundaries, acutely aware of how our roles had reversed from 5 years earlier. "The irony isn't lost on me," she said one evening as we shared a bottle of wine in my living room, James having tactfully made himself scarce. "I'm falling apart while you're happier than ever." "Life isn't a competition, Mia," I reminded her, echoing my earlier sentiment. "And happiness isn't a zero-sum game." She looked at me thoughtfully. "When did you become so wise and mature about all this?" "If our positions were reversed, I'm not sure I could be so supportive." The question gave me pause. Therapy helped, I admitted. So did time. And finding James showed me that what I had with Ethan wasn't the great love I thought it was. It was just familiar. "I think that's what happened with me and Ethan," she said quietly. "We mistook intensity for love, the excitement of the forbidden. Once that wore off, there wasn't enough substance underneath." 4 months before my wedding, Mia and Ethan officially separated. 2 months after that, they filed for divorce. The timing was awkward, creating an uncomfortable question about whether Ethan should still be invited to our wedding given their changed circumstances. "What do you think?" I asked James as we reviewed our guest list. "Would it be strange to have him there?" "It might be," James acknowledged, "but ultimately, it's about who you want present on our day. Ethan is part of your history, but does he need to be part of this new beginning?" After careful consideration, We decided not to include Ethan in the invitation. When I explained our decision to Mia, she seemed relieved. It would be weird for everyone, she agreed, especially me. As our wedding day approached, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had led me to James. The pain of betrayal had eventually opened a door to something far more suited to the person I had become. Without that difficult chapter, I might never have been assigned to edit Fractured Bonds, never met James, never discovered what a partnership of equals truly felt like. 2 weeks before our wedding, Mia helped me with final dress alterations, her trained eye for aesthetics proving valuable as we made decisions about accessories and styling. "I have a confession," she said as we left the seamstress's studio. "I had the biggest crush on J.L. Morgan before I knew he was James. His books got me through some really dark times after college." I looked at her in surprise. "You never mentioned that." "How could I?" It was embarrassing enough that I gushed about Fractured Bonds when I met him at my engagement party. "Then he turned out to be your date, and later your boyfriend." She shrugged. It felt weird to bring it up. "Is that why you seemed so fixated on him that night?" She nodded, looking slightly embarrassed. "I had this ridiculous fantasy about meeting him at a book signing someday. I even practiced what I'd say." She laughed at herself. Then there he was with my sister, of all people. Life has a strange sense of humor. The revelation was unexpected but somehow fitting, one final twist in our complicated history. "Why tell me now?" "Because we're in a better place," she said thoughtfully. "And because I want you to know that I see how perfect he is for you. How he looks at you like you're the most fascinating person in the world. You deserve that, Liv." Our wedding day dawned clear and warm, the botanical garden lush with early summer blooms. As I prepared with my closest friends, including Rebecca, who had flown in from Chicago to be my maid of honor, I felt a profound sense of rightness. There were no last-minute jitters, no doubts, just a quiet certainty about the step I was taking. Mia arrived early to help with my hair, her own recently cut into a sleek bob that signaled her post-divorce reinvention. "You look radiant," she said, adjusting my simple veil. "Truly happy." "I am," I confirmed, squeezing her hand. "Thank you for being here." "For everything." The ceremony was exactly as we'd envisioned. Intimate, meaningful, focused on the promises we were making, rather than spectacle or tradition. When James recited his vows, his voice steady and sure, I saw in his eyes the same certainty I felt in my heart. This was right. This was where we were meant to be. At the reception, held in the garden's glass-walled pavilion, my father gave a toast that brought tears to every eye. "To find love once in life is fortunate," he said, raising his glass. "To find a deeper, truer love after loss is a rare blessing. Olivia and James, may your journey together be as thoughtful and profound as the stories you both create." Later, as James and I danced beneath paper lanterns strung among the pavilion's beams, I caught sight of Mia watching us, a bittersweet smile on her face. When our eyes met, she raised her glass in a silent toast. I nodded in acknowledgement, grateful for the peace we had found after so much turbulence. "Happy?" James murmured against my ear, his arms steady around me. "Completely," I assured him. "And you?" More than I knew was possible. As we swayed to the music, surrounded by those we loved, I reflected on the strange, winding path that had led us here. 10 years earlier, I could never have imagined this outcome, that my sister's betrayal would eventually lead me to the great love of my life, that pain would transform into wisdom, that broken trust could be replaced by something stronger and more enduring. The story wasn't over, of course. Life would continue to unfold in unexpected ways. But in that moment, dancing with my husband in a garden blooming with new life, I was certain of one thing. Sometimes the detours and disappointments that seem like endings are actually beginnings in disguise. We just have to be brave enough to keep moving forward, to remain open to possibilities we never could have planned. And sometimes, if we're very fortunate, we find ourselves exactly where we're meant to be, with someone who makes the entire journey, even its painful chapters, worthwhile. The first 5 years of marriage with James unfolded like chapters in a beautifully crafted novel, each page revealing new depths, occasional plot twists, and the kind of character development that can only come from two people genuinely committed to growing together. We settled into our Park Slope apartment, establishing routines that honored both our individual creative processes and our life as a couple. James's career flourished. His third novel, completed during our first year of marriage, became his breakthrough commercial success, landing on the New York Times bestseller list and earning him the kind of literary recognition that opened doors previously closed. I continued climbing the ranks at my publishing house, eventually becoming the youngest executive editor in the company's history, specializing in literary fiction with a focus on emerging international voices. "We make a good team," James often said, and it was true. We edited each other's work, his novels, and my occasional essays for literary journals, with unflinching honesty and unwavering support. We celebrated each other's victories without competition or resentment. We built a home filled with books, art from our travels, and the kind of comfortable silence that exists only between people who truly understand each other. Our relationship with my family evolved as well. My parents, now in their early 60s, had become increasingly fond of James, treating him more like a son than a son-in-law. My father, in particular, had found in James an intellectual companion who shared his love of history and philosophy, leading to lengthy discussions during holiday gatherings that would continue via email for weeks afterward. Mia's life had taken unexpected turns in the aftermath of her divorce from Ethan. After finalizing the split, she had thrown herself into her career with renewed focus, eventually securing a position as the curator for a prestigious gallery in Chelsea, specializing in contemporary Asian art. The role suited her natural eye for aesthetics and her networking abilities, bringing her a professional confidence I hadn't seen in her before. Our sisterly relationship, once fractured by betrayal, had gradually reformed into something different but surprisingly strong. The shared experience of her divorce had, ironically, brought us closer. I became the stable presence she could turn to during her darkest moments, offering the kind of support that came from a place of genuine compassion rather than obligation. "I never thought we'd be here," she admitted one evening, 3 years after my wedding, as we shared dinner at her new apartment in the West Village. "After what happened with Ethan, I assumed you'd hate me forever." "I tried," I confessed with a small smile, "but hating someone takes so much energy. And ultimately what happened led me to James. It's hard to stay angry when the detour led somewhere better than the original destination." She nodded thoughtfully, twirling pasta around her fork. "You two have something special. Anyone can see it." After a moment, she added, "I've been seeing someone. Not seriously yet, but promising." His name was Olivia Chen, no relation to us. A corporate attorney with an unexpected passion for contemporary art. They had met at one of her gallery openings, where he had asked surprisingly insightful questions about the exhibition. He was divorced like Mia, with a 7-year-old daughter from his marriage. "He's thoughtful," Mia explained. "Steady. Not the kind of guy the first would have looked at twice in my 20s. But now..." She shrugged. "Now I appreciate someone who calls when he says he will and actually listens when I talk." I was genuinely happy for her, recognizing the maturity in her assessment. The Mia of 10 years ago had chased excitement and forbidden fruit. This Mia seemed to value substance and character, a promising evolution. When I shared the news with James later that evening, he observed, "People can change if they're brave enough to face their own patterns." Sounds like Mia's done some important work on herself. She has, I agreed. It's been remarkable to watch, actually. James and I had discussed children early in our relationship, agreeing that we both wanted a family eventually. But eventually kept extending as our careers demanded more of our attention, and as we enjoyed the freedom of our child-free life together. Spontaneous weekend trips to the Berkshires, late nights at literary events, the luxury of uninterrupted writing time. 5 years into our marriage, however, the conversation resurfaced with new urgency. I was 35, James 41, and the abstract, someday, had begun to feel more concrete. "I've been thinking," James said one Sunday morning as we lingered over coffee in our sun-drenched kitchen, "about timelines and priorities." I looked up from the manuscript I was reviewing. "That sounds ominous." He smiled, reaching for my hand across the table. "Not ominous. Just important. I realized recently that when I imagine our future, I see children in it. And I'm wondering if we should stop thinking about it in the abstract and start considering it as a real next step. The conversation that followed was honest and thoughtful, weighing the changes parenthood would bring against the growing desire we both felt to create a family together. By the end of that Sunday, we had made the decision to try for a baby, a commitment that felt both terrifying and absolutely right. Pregnancy didn't come as easily as we'd hoped. After 8 months of disappointment, we consulted specialists who identified some minor fertility issues that could be addressed but would require patience and medical intervention. The journey became more complicated than we'd anticipated, filled with temperature charts, timed procedures, and the particular grief of monthly disappointments. During this challenging period, it was Mia who proved to be an unexpected source of strength. Having recently become engaged to Adrian, she was in a happy place herself, but demonstrated remarkable sensitivity to our struggle. "It's not fair," she said one afternoon when we met for coffee after one of my doctor's appointments. "You and James would be such wonderful parents." "Life isn't fair," I replied, a lesson we'd both learned in different ways. "But we're not giving up." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're the strongest person I know, Liv. You'll get through this, whatever happens." Her words meant more than she could know. This vote of confidence from the person who had once caused me such pain, now offering genuine support during one of my most vulnerable chapters. Nearly 2 years into our fertility journey, we received devastating news. James's mother, whom I had grown to love during our visits to England, was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. We immediately flew to London, where the prognosis became clear. The disease had already spread, leaving limited treatment options and a timeline measured in months rather than years. "We should stay," James said as we lay sleepless in his childhood bedroom, the weight of impending loss heavy between us. "At least for now." I agreed without hesitation. My fertility treatments could wait. My publishing work could be managed remotely. What mattered was being present for his family during this impossible time. What had been planned as a 2-week visit extended into 3 months. I watched my husband transform into his mother's caretaker, witnessing a tenderness in him that deepened my love in ways I hadn't thought possible. We spent evenings in the hospital, and later in the hospice facility, James reading aloud from his mother's favorite books while I kept her comfortable with ice chips and gentle conversation. When Eleanor Harris finally passed, it was peaceful, her family surrounding her, James holding her hand until the final moment. At the funeral, he delivered a eulogy so moving that even the stoic British relatives openly wept. His words captured not just his grief, but a profound gratitude for the woman who had shaped him into the man I loved. Our return to New York came with unexpected clarity. "Life is so fragile," James said as we unpacked our suitcases, still heavy with grief. "I don't want to waste any more time waiting for perfect circumstances." We agreed to put the fertility treatments on hold and pursue adoption instead, a path we had discussed previously but never fully explored. The decision felt right, a way to create family that wasn't dependent on biology but on love and intention. The adoption process introduced us to a new landscape of paperwork, home studies, and emotional uncertainty. But it also brought us Zoe, a baby girl whose birth mother had selected us from the profiles at the agency, specifically citing James's books as part of her decision. "I want my daughter to be raised by someone who understands people so deeply," she had written in her letter to us. "Someone who can help her make sense of a complicated world." Meeting our daughter for the first time in the hospital remains the most transformative moment of my life. James and I stood over the bassinet, looking down at this tiny human with dark curls and solemn eyes, who would become the center of our universe. "Hello, Zoe," James whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We've been waiting for you." Parenthood changed everything, our schedules, our priorities, our relationship. The early months were a blur of midnight feedings, first smiles, and the kind of exhaustion I hadn't known was possible. James took a break from his usual writing schedule to be fully present, working on short stories during Zoe's naps instead of diving into a new novel. I arranged a flexible work situation, splitting my time between the office and home. Our apartment, once organized around our creative pursuits, transformed to accommodate toys, baby equipment, and the beautiful chaos that comes with a growing child. Zoe was nearly a year old when Mia and Adrian married in a small ceremony at his parents' home in Connecticut. Unlike her first wedding, this one felt genuine and grounded, a celebration of a relationship built on mutual respect rather than drama or forbidden attraction. "She seems happy," I observed to James as we watched Mia dance with her new husband, her face radiant with a contentment I hadn't seen in her before. "She is," James agreed, "and so are you." He glanced toward where my mother was proudly showing off Zoe to distant relatives. "We've all found our way, haven't we?" It was true. The painful chapter that had begun with betrayal had eventually led each of us to where we needed to be. Not through magic or fate, but through the hard work of growth, forgiveness, and courage to choose differently. Zoe was 2 when I received an unexpected email from Ethan, the first direct communication we'd had in nearly a decade. The message was brief but sincere, explaining that he had recently moved back to New York after several years in Chicago and was hoping to make amends with people he had hurt in the past. "I've done a lot of work on myself," he wrote. "Therapy, sobriety. Turns out I had issues there that I wasn't addressing, and just growing up. I understand if you don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that I deeply regret the pain I caused you. You deserved better." I showed the email to James, uncertain how to respond or whether I should respond at all. "What do you think?" I asked, watching his face carefully as he read. "I think," he said thoughtfully, "that forgiveness benefits the forgiver as much as the forgiven. But that doesn't mean you owe him a response if you don't want to give one." After consideration, I sent a simple reply thanking Ethan for his apology and wishing him well in his continued growth. It felt like closing a door that had been left slightly ajar all these years, not with anger, but with the quiet acknowledgement that some chapters are meant to end. Life continued its beautiful complexity. Zoe grew from toddler to preschooler, developing a personality that combined James's thoughtfulness with my determination. My career expanded to include launching a new imprint focused on diverse voices in fiction. James published his 5th novel to critical acclaim and began teaching a masterclass at Columbia once a semester. Mia and Adrian welcomed a son, making Zoe a cousin, a relationship that brought me unexpected joy as I watched the next generation form bonds untainted by our complicated past. My parents embraced their role as grandparents with enthusiasm, regularly taking both children for weekend sleepovers that gave all the adults much-needed breaks. 8 years into our marriage, with Zoe now 5 years old and thriving, James and I decided to pursue a second adoption. The process was familiar this time, though no less emotional. 6 months into our wait, we received a call about a 3-year-old boy named Leo, who needed a permanent home after multiple foster placements. "He's had a difficult start," our social worker explained, "but he's resilient and loving. We think you might be the right family for him." Meeting Leo broke and healed my heart simultaneously. A quiet child with watchful eyes and a hesitant smile, he carried the wariness of someone who had learned not to trust that good things would last. The transition wasn't easy. There were nightmares, behavioral challenges, and moments of testing that pushed us to our limits. But there were also breakthrough moments of connection that made everything worthwhile. The first time he called James Daddy, the morning he crawled into my lap with a book without being invited, his growing bond with Zoe, who took her role as big sister with remarkable seriousness. "Family isn't about biology," I told Leo one night as I tucked him in, months after he had come to live with us. "It's about who chooses to love you forever, no matter what." "Like you and Daddy and Zoe?" he asked, his brown eyes serious in the glow of his nightlight. "Exactly like that," I assured him. "We chose you, and we'll keep choosing you every single day." 10 years after my wedding to James, our family of 4 settled into a pattern that felt both ordinary and miraculous. Weekday mornings were a chaotic symphony of breakfast preparations, school lunch packing, and the search for perpetually missing shoes. Evenings brought homework supervision, dinner conversations where we each shared the best and hardest parts of our days, and bedtime stories, often original tales that James created featuring characters suspiciously similar to our children. Professionally, I had recently been offered the position of publishing director, a role that would give me more influence over the company's overall direction but would also demand more of my time and energy. The decision wasn't easy, particularly with Leo still needing extra support as he adjusted to kindergarten. "What do you think?" I asked James late one night after the children were asleep. "Be honest." He considered the question with the thoughtfulness I'd come to expect from him. "I think you'd be brilliant at it," he said finally. "And I think we can make it work as a family. The children are in school now. I can adjust my writing schedule to be more available for pickups and appointments." "Are you sure? Your new book deadline is important," he finished for me. "But not more important than this. We're partners, Liv. Your success is our success." His support meant everything. Not because I needed permission, but because I knew it came from a place of genuine belief in my abilities and commitment to our shared life. This was what real partnership looked like, making space for each other's dreams while holding the family at the center. The 10th anniversary of our wedding arrived on a perfect June day, much like the one when we had exchanged vows in the botanical garden. We had planned a small celebration, dinner with just my parents, Mia and Adrian and their son, and a few of our closest friends. That morning, James surprised me with a small box containing a necklace, a delicate gold pendant with 4 intertwined circles representing our family. "Happy anniversary," he said as he fastened it around my neck. 10 years of the best decision I ever made. "Even with all the complications?" I asked, thinking of the fertility struggles, the grief of losing his mother, the challenges of adoption and parenting. "Especially with the complications," he replied, his hands resting on my shoulders. "They're what make the story worth telling." Later that evening, after our guests had gone and the children were asleep, James and I sat on our small balcony with glasses of wine, looking out at the Brooklyn night. "I ran into Ethan today," James said suddenly, "at that coffee shop near Columbia. I looked at him in surprise. You never mentioned he was back in the city." "I didn't know until today. He recognized me first." James took a sip of his wine. "He asked about you, said he saw the announcement about your promotion in Publishers Weekly." "What did you tell him?" I asked, curious rather than concerned. "The truth, that you're extraordinary at what you do, that we have 2 amazing children, that our life together is the best thing that's ever happened to me." James smiled slightly. "He seemed genuinely happy for you, said something about how things work out as they should in the end." I considered this unexpected connection to my past. He's right, though not in the way most people mean it. Things don't work out because of fate or destiny. They work out because we make choices every day about who we want to be and what kind of life we want to build. James nodded, reaching for my hand. "That's the secret, isn't it? Life isn't about finding the perfect path. It's about how we navigate the path we're on, especially the unexpected detours." As we sat in comfortable silence, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. 10 years earlier, I had walked down the aisle toward this thoughtful, brilliant man, still carrying the scars of betrayal, but choosing to believe in possibility again. Now, a decade later, those scars had faded into barely noticeable marks on a life rich with meaning, love, and purpose. The following week, Mia called with news that left me momentarily speechless. "I saw Ethan yesterday," she said without preamble, "at that new exhibition opening at MoMA." "James mentioned he's back in the city," I replied, trying to gauge her tone. "Was it awkward?" "Surprisingly not," she admitted. "We actually had a good conversation. He's changed, more centered, less restless. He asked about you and James, about the kids." "That's nice," I said, uncertain where this was leading. "He told me something interesting," Mia continued. "He said he always knew, even back then, that you and James would end up together." "What? That's impossible. I didn't even know James then." "Not literally," Mia clarified. "He meant someone like James. Someone who matched your intelligence and depth. He said he felt inadequate with you sometimes, like he couldn't keep up. That's partly why he—" She trailed off, still uncomfortable naming their betrayal directly. Why, he turned to you. I finished for her, not unkindly. Yes. She paused. It's strange to look back now and see how wrong we were for each other. Ethan and I mean. We hurt you terribly for something that wasn't even real or lasting. But it led us all here, I pointed out. You to Adrian, me to James, even Ethan to whatever growth he's experienced. If I could go back and change it, I wouldn't. Not anymore. After we hung up, I sat with this new perspective, this final piece of a puzzle I hadn't realized was still missing. There was something profoundly healing in knowing that the pain I had experienced wasn't meaningless, that it had been a necessary catalyst for all of us to find our true paths. That evening, as James and I helped the children with a complicated art project at the kitchen table, I found myself overwhelmed with gratitude for this life we had built together. Zoe was carefully explaining color theory to Leo, who watched his sister with adoration despite pretending indifference. James caught my eye across the table, his smile reflecting the same contentment I felt. This was the happy ending I never could have imagined when my sister took my boyfriend all those years ago. Not because it was perfect or without challenges, but because it was authentically ours, built through conscious choices, hard work, and the courage to remain open to love even after heartbreak. The greatest lesson of my journey wasn't that everything happens for a reason, or that fate has a plan. It was simpler and more profound. We always have the power to write new chapters, to find meaning in our struggles, and to create something beautiful from what once felt like devastation. As Leo proudly held up his paint-smeared masterpiece and Zoe applauded her brother's efforts, I exchanged a look with James that contained a decade of shared understanding. This moment, ordinary and extraordinary simultaneously, was the real dream come true, one I never knew to wish for until life's unexpected detours led me exactly where I needed to be. 10 years after marrying James, my sister's dream man turned life partner, our journey continued to unfold in ways I never could have predicted when I first discovered my boyfriend and sister's betrayal. Life has a way of surprising us, not just with its challenges but with unexpected gifts that emerge from our darkest moments. The year after our 10th anniversary marked significant transitions for our family. Zoe, now 10, blossomed into a passionate young writer with her father's observant nature and my determination. Leo, 8, overcame many of his early attachment challenges to become a confident, kind-hearted boy with a remarkable talent for music, something neither James nor I possessed, but enthusiastically supported with weekly piano lessons. My promotion to publishing director transformed my professional life, bringing new challenges and responsibilities that stretched me in exciting ways. I now oversaw 5 imprints, including the Diverse Voices division I'd launched 3 years earlier, which had already produced 2 award-winning novels and established itself as a respected platform for underrepresented authors. James's career reached new heights when his 6th novel was optioned for a limited series by a major streaming service. The adaptation process brought him into collaboration with screenwriters and producers, opening an entirely new creative avenue he hadn't previously explored. It's strange seeing my characters interpreted by others, he confessed one evening after returning from a production meeting. Like watching someone else raise your children. Good strange or bad strange? I asked, curled beside him on our living room sofa, my reading glasses perched on my nose as I reviewed contracts. Mostly good, he admitted. It's forcing me to see the story from different angles. Some of their insights are quite brilliant, actually. This willingness to embrace new perspectives was one of the qualities I'd always loved most about James. His openness to growth, to being surprised, to finding value in unexpected places. It was a quality we both tried to nurture in our children as well. That spring, an opportunity arose that would test this philosophy in profound ways. James received an offer for a year-long visiting professorship at the University of Edinburgh, a prestigious position that would allow him to teach creative writing while working on his next novel in his ancestral homeland. It's an incredible opportunity, I acknowledged when he showed me the offer letter. But the timing is complicated with my new role, the kids' school. I know, he said, not pressuring but thoughtful. It would mean significant changes for all of us. Over the following weeks, we had many conversations about what this opportunity might mean for our family. Would I take a leave of absence from my hard-earned position? Would we uproot the children from their school and friends? Would we maintain our Brooklyn apartment or sublet it? Each question led to more questions, more considerations. "What do you really want?" James asked one night after the children were asleep. "If logistics weren't an issue, what would feel right to you?" I considered his question carefully. "I want us to keep growing, individually and as a family. I want the children to experience different cultures and perspectives. And honestly, I want to support your dreams the way you've always supported mine." The decision crystallized gradually. We would go to Edinburgh as a family for the year. My company agreed to a flexible arrangement where I would work remotely with quarterly trips back to New York for critical meetings. The children's school helped arrange a seamless transition to an international academy in Edinburgh, known for its progressive approach to education. Preparing for our year abroad became a family project. We created maps showing the journey from New York to Scotland, researched Scottish history and culture, and started a countdown calendar that Zoe decorated with drawings of castles and Loch Ness monsters. Leo, initially anxious about the change, found comfort in learning that Edinburgh had a world-renowned summer music festival he might be able to attend. "Will people talk funny there?" he asked one evening, as James showed the children pictures of the stone apartment we'd rented in Edinburgh's historic Old Town. "They have different accents," James explained patiently, "just like people from different parts of America sound different from each other. Will we sound funny to them?" Zoe wondered. "Absolutely," James confirmed with a smile. "But that's part of the adventure, learning how we're different and how we're the same." 2 weeks before our scheduled departure, I received an unexpected text message from Ethan. In the 3 years since his return to New York, our contact had been minimal, occasional brief exchanges when we happened to cross paths at industry events or through mutual acquaintances. "Heard you're moving to Scotland. Coffee before you go? Nothing urgent, just want to wish you well." I showed the message to James, who shrugged. "Up to you. Might be good closure before we leave." After consideration, I agreed to meet Ethan at a neutral cafe near my office. Walking in, I was struck by how little emotion the sight of him stirred in me now. This man, whose betrayal had once defined my understanding of heartbreak, was now just someone from my past, as familiar and distant as a character from a book read long ago. "Thanks for meeting me," he said as I slid into the chair across from him. He looked well, more settled in himself than I remembered, with threads of silver at his temples that suited him. "I hear Edinburgh is beautiful." "So they tell me," I replied, accepting the coffee he'd ordered for me. He still remembered how I took it, an oddly touching detail. "James is excited about the literary history there. The kids are nervous but curious." "They'll thrive," Ethan said with certainty. "They have you and James as parents." The compliment was genuine, lacking the undercurrent of comparison or regret I might have expected. We chatted easily about his architectural practice, which had flourished since his return to New York, and about mutual friends we occasionally still shared. As our conversation wound down, Ethan's expression grew more serious. "I wanted to tell you something before you leave," he said, turning his coffee cup slowly between his hands. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about the past, about choices and consequences." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "What happened between me and Mia? It was never about you not being enough. It was about me not being ready to be the person you needed. Or deserved." He met my eyes directly. "Watching you and James together, seeing the family you've built, it's shown me what real partnership looks like, what I want to find someday. I hope you do," I said sincerely. "Everyone deserves that kind of connection." As we said goodbye, Ethan hesitated, then said something that would stay with me during the transitions ahead. "You know, sometimes I think about how differently things might have turned out if I'd been stronger back then. But then I look at your life now, and I think maybe the universe knew what it was doing after all." I didn't believe the universe had a specific plan, but I understood what he meant. Our choices, even the painful ones, even those made by others that affect us, ultimately shape journeys we could never have anticipated. The night before our departure for Scotland, Mia and Adrian hosted a farewell dinner at their home. Our children played together in the backyard, their cousin relationships strong despite the complicated history of their parents. My parents fussed over last-minute advice about international travel, while Mia's eyes periodically misted with the impending separation. "It's only a year," I reassured her as we washed dishes together in her kitchen. "And you promised to visit during the kids' spring break." "I know," she sighed. "It's just, We've come so far, you and I. I don't want to lose that. I understood her concern. Our rebuilt relationship was precious to both of us, a testament to the possibility of healing even after profound betrayal. Distance can't touch what matters, I told her, squeezing her hand. We've survived much worse than an ocean between us. Later, as James and I tucked exhausted children into bed back in our half-packed apartment, he asked, "Second thoughts?" "No," I said confidently, just appreciating how far we've all come. 15 years ago, I couldn't have imagined standing in Mia's kitchen, feeling nothing but love for her, or saying goodbye to Ethan with genuine good wishes. Time and growth are powerful forces, James observed, switching off Zoe's bedside lamp. Speaking of which, we should get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day. Edinburgh welcomed us with classic Scottish weather, a misty rain that softened the edges of the ancient buildings and turned the cobblestone streets slick and shining. Our apartment, nestled in a 17th century building near the Royal Mile, felt like stepping into a different century, with its thick stone walls, deep-set windows, and unexpected nooks and crannies that delighted the children. "It's like living in a castle," Leo exclaimed, running from room to room despite the jet lag evident in his drooping eyelids. "A very small, very urban castle," James corrected with amusement, wrestling with our luggage in the narrow hallway. The adjustment period was both challenging and exhilarating. Everything required new learning, from figuring out the mysterious settings on our European washing machine, to understanding the local school system, to deciphering the stronger Scottish accents we encountered in shops and cafes. James thrived in his new role at the university, finding inspiration in Edinburgh's literary legacy and in the fresh perspectives of his international students. I established a remote work routine, converting the apartment's small second bedroom into an office where I connected with my New York team through early morning video calls before the children awoke. Zoe and Leo approached their new school with characteristic differences, Zoe diving headfirst into friendships and activities, Leo proceeding more cautiously but with growing confidence. Within months, both had acquired slight Scottish accents that they exaggerated when calling their grandparents, much to everyone's amusement. Our weekends became opportunities for exploration, day trips to ancient castles, hikes in the Highlands, explorations of tiny coastal villages with names the children loved to pronounce. We documented these adventures in a family blog that became our way of sharing our experiences with loved ones back home. "I never thought I'd say this," I admitted to James one evening as we walked home from a local pub where we'd enjoyed a rare date night. "But I'm grateful for this disruption. It's shown us what we're capable of as a family." He nodded, pulling me closer against the chill autumn wind. "There's something powerful about collective adaptation. We're creating a shared story our children will tell their whole lives." 6 months into our Scottish adventure, I received a surprising email from Eleanor Grant, my former boss who had retired 3 years earlier. Now in her 70s, she had reinvented herself as a literary agent, specializing in international fiction, and was planning a European tour to meet with potential clients. "I'll be in Edinburgh next month," she wrote. "Would love to see you and meet the famous James Harris at last. Also have a proposition to discuss." Eleanor's visit coincided with a particularly beautiful week in early spring, when Edinburgh shed its winter gray for unexpected sunshine. We met for lunch at a restaurant overlooking the city's dramatic skyline, Eleanor as formidable as ever despite her now silver hair and slightly slower gait. "You look wonderful," she declared, studying me with the same penetrating gaze that had intimidated me as a young editor. "Scotland agrees with you." "It's been transformative," I admitted, "for all of us." After catching up on publishing industry gossip and sharing stories about our Scottish experiences, Eleanor finally revealed her proposition. She was establishing a new literary agency with a unique focus on connecting international writers with American publishers, and she wanted me to consider becoming a partner when we returned to New York. "You have the editorial eye, the industry relationships, and now the international experience," she explained. "It would mean leaving corporate publishing, but I think you're ready for that leap." The offer caught me completely off guard. I had always seen myself as a publisher, moving up through the traditional ranks. The idea of switching to the agent side, becoming an advocate for writers rather than acquiring their work, had never seriously occurred to me. "I'd need to think about it," I told her honestly. "Discuss it with James. It would be a significant change." Of course, she nodded approvingly. Take your time. The opportunity will be there when you're ready. That evening, after sharing Eleanor's proposal with James, we sat on our apartment's small balcony overlooking the ancient rooftops of Edinburgh, considering this unexpected fork in my career path. What does your instinct tell you? James asked, always my sounding board for important decisions. That it's scary. And exciting. That it would use everything I've learned but push me in new directions. I sipped my tea, watching the last light fade from the sky. That maybe it's time to stop working for someone else's vision and help create my own. That sounds like an answer, he observed with a smile. But is it the right time? With the kids? With your career taking new directions with the adaptation? James considered this thoughtfully. I think the right opportunities rarely arrive at convenient times. That's part of what makes them growth opportunities. They require rearrangement, reconsideration. The following weeks brought serious reflection about what I truly wanted for the next chapter of my professional life. I realized that while I loved the stability and prestige of my publishing director role, I had increasingly felt constrained by corporate priorities that didn't always align with my personal vision for publishing. As an agent, I could champion voices I believed in, help shape literary careers from their beginnings, and potentially have more flexibility for family life. The more I considered it, the more right it felt, a natural evolution rather than a dramatic departure. By the time I called Eleanor to accept her offer, the decision felt less like a leap into the unknown and more like stepping onto a path that had been waiting for me all along. Brilliant, she said simply. We'll talk details when you're back in New York. In the meantime, start thinking about the writers you've always wished you could have signed, but couldn't because of corporate constraints. Our year in Edinburgh passed with the strange duality of time during significant life chapters. Individual days sometimes stretched long and challenging, but the months themselves seemed to accelerate, bringing our departure date into focus with surprising speed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.